The first arrests have been made of those we call homegrown terrorists. Look at their faces. They don't seem any different from the faces of other young people. You can find plenty of people like that in universities and cafes just about anywhere. But behind these seemingly normal faces, there's a burning fire of thirst, of killing. Well, let's go step by step.
When we think of Antifa, we usually imagine scenes like these. Democrat-led cities like Portland have let Antifa cause chaos and disorder in the streets for years.
November 2024 brought not just shock to some and relief to others, it was a turning point in the country's history. Whether we can keep America, the course of America that we're trying to return to, I don't know, but it seems that America is the only one in the world, once again the only one in the world, that is trying to return freedom to its citizens without bloodshed or uprisings. True freedom, not the kind Che Guevara sang about. Maybe he didn't sing, by the way. Maybe he just talked about freedom. All revolutions, wars of liberation, bloody riots, and protests only made people's lives worse. The Jacobins in France, the Bolsheviks in Russia, the National Liberation Movement in Africa, the Ayatollahs in Iran, well, many others, of course. But in the United States, Americans are trying to legally rid themselves of those who tried to make our lives convenient for themselves. Not taking into account that in the United States, the government hasn't granted anything to the people, that the citizens hire the government to protect the country, the population, well, the poor and the helpless. Nowhere in the Constitution, which we are obligated to follow, at least those of us who came here raised our hand and swore an oath. It doesn't say that we can be milked, pushed around, thrown in jail, or have the results of our decisions manipulated. We Americans, both those who were born here and those who became Americans, have proven to be strong enough. Thanks to Trump, around whom we managed to unite, who, in my opinion, is the only politician I know who does not pursue personal enrichment at our expense. Here we are. We are trying to stop a society that was rushing toward the abyss, and so far we are keeping America on the edge of the abyss. Ladies and gentlemen, we haven't moved away from the edge yet, but we are holding on, and maybe in time, if God wills, we will turn it in another direction.
You know, the 2024 elections really became a turning point for America, a tipping point. For years, Antifa and far-left extremists often acted with impunity, protected by state and local governments. The idea of really cracking down on these left-wing extremists is, to put it mildly, a politically complicated task. Now, President Trump acts without restrictions in his second and final term, no longer thinking conservatively. No, it's full speed ahead. And what's great is that now a new standard is being set. He's kind of crossed that line. Let's put it this way. He's pushing the boundaries, and I think in many ways, this signals the end of this era of lawlessness.
I'm showing you the program. Well, let's say translated into Russian, it sounds like liberal mindset. It focuses on today's events in this country. And in this program, other paramilitary Antifa groups and other leftist squads, yes, they are today's, let's say, military expression of the left-wing Democratic Party's ideas. Subtitles.
Antifa now. Antifa is now labeled a terrorist group, and the country's first terrorism charges are being filed against its militants. This, of course, concerns the case of the armed ambush on immigration and customs enforcement agents in Texas. I believe this was in the middle, at the beginning of summer, if I'm not mistaken. Well, and now the federal government is doing what it should have done many years ago, treating these organized political, violent terrorist groups exactly as terrorists.
President Trump's executive order designated Antifa as a terrorist organization, and anyone who is in it, well, at least from this moment on, who participates, gives support, or promotes them, will be considered an accomplice to terrorism. I don't know, as they say, whether this law applies retroactively or not. And those who committed crimes will receive a completely different punishment now in connection with this new law.
All right, friends, here's the story. Two Antifa activists have been officially charged with terrorism for participating in a coordinated attack on an immigration and customs enforcement facility in Texas in July. This was not a peaceful protest or people in frog costumes shouting nonsense at the immigration and customs enforcement facility. We are stolen people from stolen land. This was a planned armed ambush. They had body armors, explosives, rifles, lookouts, and they even shot a police officer in the neck. People claim Antifa isn't an organization, but it's hard to agree when this was clearly organized under the Antifa banner. These terrorist degenerates in this case also gathered in advance at a trans-Antifa safe house in Dallas, connected to radical networks, and began an attempt at an urban guerrilla attack. This is by definition domestic terrorism, and charges have now been filed. See what Kash Patel said.
A grand jury has indicted 2 members of a cell linked to Antifa who carried out an attack on a detention center, assaulting law enforcement officers and police. So far, 20 people have been charged. But the key point here is that for the first time under the president's order designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization, we have charged these 2 individuals with providing material support to terrorism for their involvement in Antifa. This was a coordinated, planned attack by dozens of people with the intent to kill police officers, and Larry, the police officer, was actually wounded in the neck. These guys came and caused a scene at the detention center using fireworks, then brought long guns and rifles. They were equipped with bulletproof vests and masks and opened fire on law enforcement. This is what President Trump is prioritizing. We have to protect the men and women of law enforcement. And yes, Antifa exists. It is a terrorist organization. This is the first charge under this new classification. The FBI is tracking the money and will dismantle these networks because people are funding them. We'll find them. They have the same criminal responsibility as those who pull the trigger.
Those who gave money, taught, trained, brainwashed, they are equally responsible for this attack for injuring the police officer. And I'll tell you, those who were arrested will very soon start doing what is called, in prison slang, singing. They'll share everything they know. Why? Because in prison, the romance of heroism and suffering for an idea, whatever that idea may be, by the way, becomes much less appealing than it seemed before. Prison is routine, boring, unheroic, and not romantic at all. I was there myself for only 3 days. I realized it's very boring there, though to be fair, I was in a military prison. For something minor, just something small, I fell asleep. It happens. It's not glamorous or comfortable there. After that, I didn't fall asleep again and didn't want to.
People on the left and far left say that Antifa doesn't exist. It's a state of mind. Blah, 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 blah. You're talking about 2 real people, domestic terrorists. Fine, they were indicted by a grand jury. If they're not real, why were 2 people indicted for participating in the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Facility attack? They must be real.
Yes, I encourage everyone to read the indictment's first sentence, which says, the North Texas Antifa cell. That's the very first line. Where are these people cooperating from and coming from? It's not only Texas. They're setting fire to courthouse buildings in Portland. They're engaging in destructive activities in Los Angeles, and the FBI has arrested dozens of these people. And thanks to our new investigative programs under President Trump, which designate them as domestic terrorism, we've opened several field investigations across the country, studying banking and financial networks. We view them as terrorists, like Al-Qaeda or Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. People are paying for this destructive act of violence, and those people will be held accountable, now that we have the authority needed to prosecute them.
If there is no such organization, then the Texas branch of what? Organized an armed attack on A's.
A Democratic activist from Kenosha, Wisconsin, was arrested and charged with threatening to kill immigration and customs enforcement agents. After his viral video on TikTok, he said, "When you're lying motionless, the immigration and customs enforcement patch will face the sky and will loot your corpses. And I can't wait to see those videos." The suspect in this case is 38-year-old Andre Stenton. And really, just think for a second. Can you imagine recording a video like that on TikTok at the age of 38? How stupid and mind-numbing is that? But I think people are learning this isn't Joe Biden's America anymore. No, we've officially entered the land of wizards. You are absolute fools.
This is one of those people who, even at 40, still lives in his parents' basement, plays video games for teenagers, and spends his time pleasuring himself with his favorite door.
And now, if you engage in this kind of rhetoric, now if you participate in such behavior, in such violent rhetoric, the feds will come for you. And I say, fine, arrest every one of them. This is no longer politics, this is law and order. And I know the left will talk about the suppression of American citizens, the arrest of political dissenters. That's not what's happening here. This administration is absolutely right to relentlessly pursue these people, identify them, expose them, and arrest them, holding accountable anyone who threatens federal officers with death online, and honestly, anyone in the country. And no, this is not authoritarianism. This is how a civilized nation protects itself. This is how standards are set and maintained. Threats of violence, threats of murder and harm are not protected by freedom of speech. This is not freedom, just as an armed ambush on federal agents is not activism. This is terrorism. These Antifa ghouls are starting to realize we're not afraid of them. But I guarantee you that this administration is putting fear into their hearts. I'm sure you've noticed that, right? Suddenly, these far-left protests have become pretty peaceful. What's happening in Portland now? Lately, it's been mostly calm there. It's kind of awkward. It's stupid and annoying, of course, but at least it's gotten a lot calmer. No Kings also went by almost without any problems. And this happens because these people know that if they start causing trouble, this administration will hold them accountable. Like I said, LARPing ends when real consequences are on the line.
When you know for sure that you'll be caught and punished, and not just a slap on the wrist, but years of imprisonment. Throwing rocks at passing cars or burning down stores and offices somehow stops being appealing. Our legislation lacks a very important provision, namely compensation for damages. Let's say you set a store on fire, and to repair it, you need $20,000 plus $10,000 in lost profits. That's what it's called. You cost $30,000. To catch the criminal, arrest, jail, and try him in court. Well, another $20,000, let's say, and that's for the community. We, the community, the insurance company, altogether will spend $50,000 on you. I would multiply that number by 3, maybe even by 5, actually, and until the defendant
Has paid the amount?
I would keep him on the hook, so to speak. If he wants sitting in prison and working as a turner or a janitor there, I don't know. He would give half of his earnings for his upkeep in prison and the other half to the insurance company that paid for the repairs, returning it to the state. The money spent on catching, trying, and keeping the criminal. Of course, when it comes to murder, the calculation is a bit different, so to speak. But everything except murder fits perfectly into the scheme. Pay back 3 times more than what you stole, broke, burned, or whatever was needed to catch you. But why die? Did you suffer through this nightmare so long? That's the right question. Good question. Let's try to figure it out.
The only reason this went on for so long is because the Democrats allowed it, they funded it. There were Democratic prosecutors who let these people go. Some blue city mayors and state governors ordered police to stand down. All this time, the media called all these weirdos on the streets peaceful protesters when they clearly were not. And now? Well, this administration instilled fear in them. And it's not a fascist fear, no. It's the fear of consequences, it's the law. And suddenly everything got better. And I'm telling you, this will continue because most people don't want to go to prison for 25 years. I would
not want to, damn it. I think many others wouldn't want to either. But they don't give 25 years for election fraud yet. And that's where the Democrats feel right at home. That is, if they also forge, manipulate, and lie at home.
Texas is investigating more than 2,700 potential illegal immigrants on the voter rolls. Ladies and gentlemen, the question arises, what will happen next year in the midterm elections? Donald Trump won the 2024 popular vote. That's amazing, right? And one of the main issues was immigration. Ordinary Americans were tired of it. They said it was a problem. Joe Biden and the Democrats were involved in child trafficking. I'm not even exaggerating. They put the children of illegal immigrants on planes and transported them all over the country, dropping them off in random places. Trump has so far uncovered at least one case in his efforts to enforce law and order, and this is aimed at shutting down Customs and Border Protection Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Department of Homeland Security. Child slaves in California are growing marijuana. That's how serious it was. So now the question is how violence from the far left against Department of Homeland Security employees will affect the midterm elections. Well, the data suggests that along with the Supreme Court's review of the Voting Rights Act, this could lead to Republicans breaking the trend and keeping control of Congress until the midterm elections. Historically, what happens is you get a president, the midterm elections happen, and the opposition party wins. Usually this happens because people blame the party in power. That's why everything keeps shifting back and forth. You rarely see Republicans winning elections consecutively after 2 terms. We've seen violent attacks, assassination attempts, terrorist acts against immigration and customs enforcement, and customs and border protection agents, vehicle rammings, and shootings. I think ordinary people are starting to get scared. But with all that, there's one factor about illegal immigration that I think could lead to a Democratic victory, and that's illegal immigrants voting. Here's a story from Post Millennial and others, dated the 15th. The Minnesota elections director says illegal immigrants can vote using state-issued driver's licenses.
From the Democrats can count on winning only if they can get illegals onto the voter rolls.
The Post-Millennial says Texas discovered thousands of illegal immigrants on voter rolls after auditing voter records. They were shocked. On Monday, Texas Secretary of State Jane Nelson said that more than 2,700 possible illegal immigrants are registered to vote. Now it's scary. I suppose we could lose the election because of the very thing we're trying to fight against, namely illegal immigration. The Trump administration's decision to give states free and direct access to this dataset for the first time was a turning point. We appreciate our partnership with the federal government. To verify the citizenship of those on our voter rolls and maintain the accuracy of the voter lists, Texas was able to check the voter rolls through the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements database. The Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements, which was able to confirm 2,724 potential non-citizens registered to vote in the Lone Star State. The state government gave these lists to counties to run the elections, to conduct their own investigations regarding the eligibility of those who were identified as non-citizens. If it is determined that they are violating the Texas Election Code, these individuals will be referred to Attorney General Ken Paxton. Each voter who was flagged will be required to provide proof of citizenship within 30 days, and if the government does not receive a response, their registration will be canceled. Everyone has the right to vote. It is sacred and must be protected. We urge the counties to conduct thorough investigations to determine if there are any ineligible voters among the electorate, just as they do with any other data sets we provide. The Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements database is vital and should remain a key resource among those we continue using in Texas, to make sure only eligible voters take part in our elections, just as...
This should be clear to everyone. After all, it's hard to imagine that someone in the United States doesn't understand the need to verify who is voting. And that's besides the fact that people who have never contributed anything to the country have the right to decide with us how and to whom the money we've earned should be given. In other words, they decide that money they haven't earned, meaning it's not their money, they decide who to give it to after taking it away from working citizens. Wonderful.
They say. During the Minnesota House Fraud Committee meeting on Tuesday, Republican Representative Petty Anderson asked a question about how the system would work. Quote, "So, we issue driver's licenses to anyone. You don't have to be a citizen here. If someone registers with a driver's license but has a wrong or missing social security number or other issue, they're marked incomplete. But if they come to vote with a driver's license, does that make their registration suddenly valid?" Linnell answered. "If an illegal immigrant presents to the election judge that acceptable identification document, it removes the challenge from the list, and they are allowed to vote." Vice Chairman Anderson?
Thank you. So we issue driver's licenses to everyone. It's not required here. Being a citizen is not required. It's a photo identification. If someone comes in, registers, they have a driver's license, but they have the wrong social security number or they don't have one or something else, they become incomplete. But if they come to vote with the driver's license, that suddenly makes them okay.
Mr. Linnell?
Madam Chair, So the designation in the list for someone whose registration was incomplete. If they present this acceptable identification document to the judge at the polls, it will remove the challenge from the list and they will be allowed to vote.
Anderson, all right.
Here you go.
Your problem.
Maybe.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Linnell. So, just to clarify, someone who is not a citizen but presents a driver's license at this stage of the process could be allowed to vote.
Madam Chair, during registration, as well as when submitting a ballot, each voter signs a statement confirming their right to vote, including meeting all eligibility requirements and that they are citizens of the United States. Mr. Linnell, the voter was ineligible to vote. This will be reported to the district attorney.
Anderson, the answer is yes, he is an illegal immigrant. He will be able to vote. But if later someone says that he needs to be checked, if someone suddenly points at him and says, "Shouldn't we check this person?" And if the check reveals that he was not eligible, then his vote, there will be no protection. But that's me speaking now, not him. It will happen after his voice and the voices of thousands like him are counted and the elections are over. That's why it's crucial to check and cross it out afterward. Overall, it seems that the Democratic Party is losing points. As I've said many times, in the elections after the presidential ones, usually 2 years later, what we call the midterm elections, the party that didn't win the presidency usually wins. In other words, the losing party. Right now, it looks like even in the midterm elections, the Republicans will win. It's not 100%, it's not 90%, but I think it's about 51 to 52%. The Democrats, having decided to oppose everything Trump does, have put themselves in a ridiculous position. Among all these mandatory things, everything he does, yes, there will definitely be some things that people like. And the Democrats will oppose even that, based on the doctrine, on the position that whatever Trump does is terrible. He's a dictator, he's a fascist, and as De Niro says, clinically insane. But even a broken clock shows the correct time twice a day. I mean, even if Trump is broken, insane, at least twice a day he shows the correct time. And even that turned out to be a trap for the Democratic Party. For example, closing the borders in the attempt, so to speak, to clear America of illegal immigrants, especially criminals first and foremost. And the Democrats who decided to oppose everything, well, that's their call. Everything he does is terrible. So now they are forced to oppose the deportation of criminals and the clearing of the streets from murderers, thieves, and rapists. So, what do you think? Which position do the people support? Trump demands to ban men from participating in women's sports competitions, while the Democrats support it. What do you think? Where rednecks, and where there are no rednecks, just regular people, right? What do people think about this? Trump wants to reduce crime in big cities, but the Democrats are resisting this. So in other words, they're saying no, either we should leave it as it is or we should increase crime in big cities. So what do you think? Are the people in these cities with the Democrats or maybe with Trump? I think you've already understood everything. I won't go on for long. So what should the Democrats do? They are trying to create situations for which people can blame Trump. For example, I believe it was in 2017, 2019 under Trump when the Democrats caused a government shutdown. Well, the end. Again, I think it was the end of 2018, but I could be wrong. Public opinion polls show the propaganda led 54% of people to blame Trump rather than the Democrats. But this time they did the same thing, and only 44% think that Trump is to blame. It was 54 last time, and they hoped it wouldn't change, but now it's just 44%. Because Trump has already completed the first round, now he's on the second. That's the idea. The campaign failed. And in 2019, street violence was presented as something that would continue as long as Trump was in the White House. And 60% of the population decided that Grandpa Biden would come and bring order to the White House. But the very first attacks by Antifa were met by the National Guard right away, and Antifa itself was declared a domestic terrorist group. Then the Democrats introduced No to the Czars. Morsh. According to various sources, they spent between $50 and $100 million to organize it. Maybe they stole half of it along the way, but at least they got somewhere between $50 and $100 million from various Soroses and Schmoroses to hold the event, hoping that people would see the crowds of protesters and think that Trump is the one to blame for the problems. And his approval rating would drop, just like it did in 2019. But this time, people saw that 90% of the protesters they're all white and clearly brought in from nursing homes because they stick together in small groups. And Trump's approval rating didn't go down, it actually went up by another 1% because of this. Everything that's being done now is a frantic attempt, as Americans figuratively say, to throw wet, sticky, and somewhat undercooked spaghetti at the wall. And the leader, maybe something will stick. We didn't know. We don't know. We won't know until it happens, whether it will stick in the future or not. But for now, nothing is sticking. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't forget to hit the bell. It's important. The technical guys explained to me that our channel has a very low ratio of subscribers to those who have hit the bell. For some reason, this is not good for His Majesty the algorithm. So right now, as they say, without leaving the checkout, hit the bell. Oh, by the way, subscribe if you haven't already, because when you do it while watching, I don't really know. I'm just sharing what I've heard. Smarter people explained it to me this way. The algorithm factors this in positively. I read the comments only for the first 2-3 hours after the video is released. I usually read them sometimes when I have time, and in the evening one more time as well. But, so to speak, I don't reply to all of them, but I do reply to some. I read all of them, in general. So, in advance, thank you very much. The Democrats are on the verge of an internal civil war within their party, or a complete shift of the Democrats towards socialism and maybe even communism. In the past, it was the union of Soviet Socialist Republics and German Democratic Republic. Now it's North Korea, Cuba, or fascism. Such variants of fascism are China, Iran, and Russia. There are many unorthodox ones. A Democrat is horrified by Ocasio, Cortez, Manjami, and Sanders. But their leaders, whether elected or appointed, and others, are afraid to drink. And they pretend that they are the old guard at the helm, and that they are steering the Democratic Party, which is not true. Democrat. It's crucial to win a congressional majority in 2026, just a year away. They will do any crazy things, ladies and gentlemen. And so supposedly the sticky pasta will stay on the wall. But for us, keeping the majority in Congress, and the bigger the margin, the better, is incredibly important. So, as Trump said, fight, 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 which in Russian means Boris, 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 goodbye.